Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SAG-AFTRA podcast. I'm Duncan Crouch-Ireland, National Executive Director of SAG-AFTRA.
And I'm Ben Whitehair, Executive Vice President of SAG-AFTRA.
Artificial intelligence, or AI, is a topic many in the entertainment industry are both excited and concerned about. As the technology improves, machine learning is rapidly being adopted into the content creation process, from editing and special effects to the scripts and performances themselves.
Our two guests, Nina Schick and Matt Bellany, have looked deeply into this burgeoning technology and are here to give us an update on where we are now with AI and what we can expect in the future.
Nina Schick is an author, advisor, and speaker specializing in AI. Nina wrote her groundbreaking book on AI-generated content called Deepfakes in 2020.
Matt Bellany is the founding partner of Puck, a next-generation digital media company covering the power centers of Hollywood, Silicon Valley, Washington, and New York. Matt also writes a twice-weekly newsletter called What I'm Hearing about the entertainment industry.
Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So I'm curious, when we talk about how the AI revolution is impacting the entertainment business, how do you think about that? What does that mean to you? How do you see the intersection of those two things?
So I really see this as the start of a seismic revolution, because the type of AI we're talking about now is newly being crowned as generative AI. And unlike other forms of AI, what's unique about this form of AI is that it can actually create something new. So in practice, you can almost think of it as the production process of anything that thus far has been seen as unique to human creativity or intelligence. Parts of that production process can be done by AI, and it can create content across all medium, whether it's images, audio, video, text, or 3D. So this really is a new building block for how all content is going to be created in the future. So when you think about entertainment, the future of entertainment, you cannot take away the fact that increasingly all content will be created by artificial intelligence. So really, I think we're only in the foothills of a revolution. This technology is now exponential. And I've been tracking it for 5-6 years. You've only really started to see some of the impressive stuff in the last 6 months. The next 12 months are going to be even wilder.
You say all content. What does that mean? How does that translate into entertainment? Because the way I see it is AI is a tool. AI is something that can help you express yourself and help performers and writers do their best work. But I don't necessarily see it as a replacement. Do you see it as a replacement?
No, I don't. So that's, I think, one of the most interesting and important points, and actually a point that I think is going to become so controversial in the public debate. The question around, is this automating me or is this augmenting me? And I think it's going to be the latter, although there's going to be a lot of concern that it's going to be the former. So if you're a writer like I am, you can use these generative text tools. There's been so much hype about ChatGPT. There has been another company that does generates copy, which when it raised its seed round a few months ago, it was immediately minted as a unicorn. When I think about using these text generation tools as an author, I see it as a means to make my process easier. So if I'm stuck, I can throw something to ChatGPT, get some new ideas, but I'm not actually using it to replace my style, my writing, my creativity. It's augmenting rather than automating. Although the question about automation, I think, is going to be one that causes a huge public furore. And not only in entertainment, across industries, because it isn't only that AI can be used to generate entertainment content, but things like legal papers. So for the first time, you're going to be looking at white collar jobs that are potentially being quote unquote automated by AI.
So everybody better get creative, because that's the key. And I think our listeners will be somewhat reassured by what you just said, Nina. And I think there's also the question of like filtering the AI generated content to find stuff that's actually compelling and interesting. I mean, I've been thinking about the quote that, if you took a million monkeys and they typed at a million typewriters, that eventually they generate the works of Shakespeare. And to me, that feels a little bit like generative AI, in the sense that it can generate this massive quantity of output, but somebody has to actually be able to look at that output and determine what is even worth considering. And for those of us who've tried the Lensa app, for example, you can put your photos in and you can generate 100 or 500 photos of yourself, but 90% of them are 99% of them are probably photos you'd never want to show anyone because they're horrible. So you've got to have like this, I think, at least at this point, this human element that determines what is actually worthy of continuing. And that's to me, that works really well with what you're saying about augmentation, because then you can use these tools to help you, but not to replace you.
That's what we're talking about now. I do wonder whether the replacement fear will become more real once the tools get strong enough to originate the beloved performance or the beloved audio. I mean, perfect example is the James Earl Jones example. He retired from playing Darth Vader, and he essentially licensed his voice to a Ukrainian company that does AI-based cloning work, where Darth Vader can potentially live forever as a figment of James Earl Jones's voice. That's great, and I think that's something where it's being used in a positive way, where the performer is ultimately benefiting from that and a character that he created. What happens on the next Star Wars villain, where the original voice is not James Earl Jones, but it is machine created? Disney would own that voice forever. And that is a performer that is not performing. It is a machine-based AI performance that is then known as the Star Wars villain.
It's such an interesting point, Matt. And I mean, I think that raises the sort of copyright issue that I think Nina hinted at before, which is, is that actually a genuine creation, or is what the AI is doing to create that voice actually taking human inputs, and a lot of them, and then using that, and yeah.
And are they a member of this guild?
And are they a member of this union? And is copyright law ready to deal with the implications of that? Because, copyright has always been focused on creativity. And if you are simply taking inputs from some other source and mashing them up and then outputting a amalgamation of them, that's not a copyrightable content, and that's certainly not original content. So I think if your point is at some point the technology may be good enough that it actually can create truly original outputs, that I think it's going to be a fascinating question, one we're going to have to deal with from a legal point of view as to whether that's protected and what rights people might have in the inputs they put into them. Because
it might ultimately be protected, but the scheme we have now has evolved over 100 years, and it's evolved to a place where people like James Earl Jones have protections as to what you can and can't do with his voice. And the scheme will need to be updated and evolve to protect the people who are creating what ultimately becomes a voice that is owned by the Walt Disney Company.
Right. And I think we have to also, that urges caution on the part of our members and anybody else about allowing the use of their content, their image, their likeness, their persona in ways that can be perpetuated without their consent. And so that's certainly something we've been warning our members about. In terms of scans of performers, we've been on that for years, making sure that those are limited to the use that they're originally secured for.
And that's a guild thing and not an individually negotiated thing?
That's a guild thing. But I think, the truth is it's going to have to be addressed on a broader level, because there's so much unauthorized use and misappropriation of people's work that's happening outside of companies in the industry who are responsible and parties to collective bargaining agreements, et cetera. And so, this is why it's also a public policy issue from my point of view.
Yeah, I think it's both a broader public policy and, as we've talked about earlier, like the actual state of our intellectual property laws and the way society's interacting with that on a large scale. And then for our members, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people first join the union, is they start to realize, oh, wait a second, without the protections of the union, my image and likeness, like, oh, wait a second, this non-union commercial that I did, they're now doing other things with it because I signed away my in perpetuity rights to whatever. And they, oh my gosh, like, and people hear those horror stories and go, oh, wait a second, I actually care about those protections and having the collective be able to fight for some standards around this. Because I think, and I'm curious from both of you, like, what, Nina, you mentioned some of the like augmentation of creativity as a positive thing, and Matt or Nina, again, I'm curious if there are other pieces that you see as like positive enhancements in entertainment that you see happening or about to happen?
So just to come back on the augmentation point, which Duncan also raised, I think creativity is going to matter more than ever, because the first thing that I think is going to happen is that there's no doubt that there's an AI-powered content revolution on its way. And the barriers to entry in terms of creating compelling content are going to be lowered, because all of a sudden now billions of people, literally billions of people, will be able to play with these AI-powered content creation tools. Does that mean, you talked about the monkeys and the typewriters, that everyone is going to create content that's artistic, worthwhile, viral? Absolutely not. There'll just be a lot more content because AI is the production machine, but actually separating the wheat from the chaff is going to be important. So like the best pieces of content that are deemed artistic or of value, that has nothing really to do with the fact that AI is now powering part of the process. The second thing is that we've been talking about it in the sense of, oh, will AI completely, again, automate the voice? What about the completely synthetic voice? Is this going to not be the ultimate outcome? Because there's no doubt that these technologies are going to become so much better that you are going to be able to just have a completely synthetic voice in an ad, for example. But I think actually how it will shake out is that it'll be a combination. So you will have a voice actor who does part of an ad. I don't know, let's say it's for latest Nike shoes. But because now AI can be used to generate content at scale, that's going to allow for personalization. So you have the actor who does like a base ad, but now if it's Nina listening to that ad in London, that ad can be personalized for me based on my data. So it's going to be the actor's real voice combined with a synthetic element of that actor's voice. So I think it's not going to be that actors or talent are going to be replaced, but it's going to allow for many millions of iterations of that real, authentic piece of work, which will be personalized to consumers. So one of the really exciting things about entertainment that generative AI promises is a future of content where, first of all, there's endless potential for IP expansion. And second, you're really starting to build audiences of one. You really can personalize every piece of content for one consumer. And that is super exciting in my view. But of course, all the legal issues around copyright, licensing, IP, my God, we have no precedent, and that all needs to be worked out.
And I think going back to your question as to the benefits here, I do think bringing costs down is a real benefit of this technology. And if you look at what's already being done with dubbing and with visual effects, using AI-powered visual effects. I mean, I was watching a video on Twitter this morning where someone had used a lip reader program to create a conversation between AOC and Jim Jordan on the Senate floor using video that was real, but put mouths on them and put voices on them and created a whole new version of it that was presented as real, but it was fake. And that's a powerful tool at a very low cost. So I think as the creation of entertainment is getting more and more expensive, these tools can be used to bring down those cost centers.
And it's kind of a scary implementation too, because obviously
that one was. Yeah. I thought for a second it was real, and then I was like, oh, no.
But I think it highlights something that's really relevant for all of us as well, which is what then becomes important is the question of what's real, what's authentic, and what's not authentic.
And what's endorsed by the person who's in the...
Right.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, I think there's a possibility that the proliferation of sort of AI-generated, voices or personas will actually raise the value of real human personas, because that is going to feel authentic to people. That's why... And again, I'm not endorsing anyone in particular, but whether it's the Kardashians or whether it's Jojo Siwa, whoever it is that matters to you as a person, and I think this goes to your point of the audience of one. The audience of one times 100,000 times a million, but whoever's important to you, knowing that that's authentically something that they are connecting with you about, or that they are endorsing, or that they are recommending, or that they have created, may become actually more important. But once people realize this,
and more valuable potentially to the families of performers. Because if you start looking at the history of entertainment and the tools become good enough to take audio from 1975 and put it in an ad in 2023, there's value there for the heirs of that person that maybe wasn't captured before.
I mean, if you're an artist, I think of it as a way to expand your portfolio. So if it's your authentic voice, or you are in a film without any kind of synthetic overdub, it's just like the value of that goes up, just like a handmade product right now. This isn't mass produced. This is handmade by artisans. You're willing to pay more for that. But similarly, if there is a way where they can license their likeness or their voice so that, you know, they can create cameo style appearances for millions of their fans, and they can find a way to make money from each one of those individual content experiences, that's just going to give them so much more earning potential. But of course, the devil's in the detail. How are you going to negotiate those kind of licensing deals where it's your voice, which is synthetically generated? This is, I guess, where the union
and
comes
how are you
in.
going to authenticate it, and
Absolutely.
how are people going to know that what they're really hearing is legitimate or seeing is legitimate? And I think that's an issue we'll all have to take on.
Is this an authenticated synthetic version as well? Yeah.
You know, when I talk to my fellow members, I think there is a balance between an awareness that the entertainment industry and the economy writ large is continuing to change, right? I mean, the way entertainment looks now in some ways is vastly different than it was. And in some ways it's still the same, right? There's still the same core value and approach of storytelling and creativity and connection and these other pieces that I think is at the core of most performers, educators, right? Those core values are still there, but the mechanisms do change and can change rapidly. And the balance between, hey, if there's a new way for me to use the skills that I have to generate more money, or, you know, I mean, we've seen it in the music industry, right? And the way that people are monetizing their unique creativity has changed pretty drastically. And I think that's very exciting, while at the same time making sure that we don't get exploited. And I think there's a very real fear that I think is based on plenty of examples over the decades of, hey, this something new comes out and everybody goes, hey, well, just ignore all the rules because it's new and it's amazing. And, you know, when you're in free market capitalism as a business, that can kind of work itself out. But as an individual and a persona and a creative, you know, making sure that we have those guidelines. And that's why, you know, SAG-AFTRA's had a presence at CES for 2 decades and is constantly looking at, like, yeah, what is the cutting edge of technology and how do we make sure that we are able to take advantage of these amazing opportunities?
Well,
and still have
somebody's
protections.
making money off of the Tom Cruise deep fake. And it's not Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
'Cause
Chris
that thing
Yeah.
keeps popping up
Yeah.
in my feed over and over again.
Yeah.
And those are video views that are monetizable.
Yeah.
So, you know, there
Well,
is
they've
money.
started a company off the back of
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, Ben, I mean, you know this better than anybody, but as you know, our members typically, you know, they put together a career in a variety of ways in the industry, right? I mean, most of our members don't work for one company. Other than people who are on a soap opera for 30 years, most people don't work for the same company for long term, and they actually put together a career using different aspects of the industry, whether it's their influencer work combined with their film and television work, combined with doing, you know, things on live theater, whatever the combination might be for them. So perhaps that's another aspect of how AI can help provide more opportunities to a performer, because you know, we constantly hear stories about performers who have to turn down one job because of conflicts with another job, and where there is the ability to do more using AI, that can also provide an opportunity to be, you know, to be there for more. I think I think it was it Matt Damon, I think, who recently said that he was going to be in Titanic, and then he couldn't because he was committed to the Bourne
You might have to do Bourne.
trilogy,
Yeah.
and that he was noting that, you know, he's missed out on his back end for the biggest movie in history or whatever. So
Yeah.
I
and
think
that
Matt
happens
Damon's
too.
doing
Oh, is that
fine.
right?
I think he's doing fine, but I mean, I guess my point just being that, you know, in a world of AI, maybe Matt Damon could have done, but not that I'm seeking to replace.
And that
Leonardo
happens with your
DiCaprio.
working actor, you know, your member who's been at it and working, and all of a sudden books a series, and now that there's a conflict, and maybe there's
And it could be a
ways
day
that-
of reshoots where all you had to do is be
Yeah.
there for
Right.
20 minutes
Yeah.
in a scene.
Right.
And maybe there's now a way for you to do that and not lose the other gig.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always feel like it's important for us, and I think we're doing that in this conversation and in every conversation, to see all aspects of these technology developments, because it's so easy to just be afraid of them and to want to hold them back, or to put our head in the sand and hope that it doesn't, materialize. But I think what's actually healthier for our members and for us as an industry is to really, have a clear view of all the challenges and risks, but also honestly acknowledge the good aspects of it as well, because it's really all in how you use it. And the technology itself is not fundamentally good or bad. It's the implementation and use of that technology by our industry and everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we've talked a lot about the sort of potential impact of this. If we fast forward really further in the future, so both of you become, you are futurists, but even more futurists. I mean, do we foresee a future where something can entirely be created using AI from beginning to end? I think we've talked about some of the challenges in that presently, but
something good?
Yeah, something good.
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this entire space, right, generative AI, is less than 10 years old. I started tracking it in 2017 when it first appeared, surprise, surprise, in porn, non-consensual porn, I should add, because pornography is so pioneering. And we now have hit a really exponential rate with generative AI. If you had told us, even AI researchers, even 12 months ago, that the capabilities that we have now would have been possible, from DALL-E 2 to Stable Diffusion to ChatGPT, which are essentially these general generative models that can produce a 2D asset, whether it's text or an image from a mere text prompt, they would have said, no, you're kidding. That's just not possible. But here we are. So I predict that not only in the next 5 years will you be able to generate completely with AI 3D assets, as well as moving picture, so film, video, there is no doubt that in 12 months' time, we'll be like, that's crazy. If we had come back to this hotel room 12 months ago, we wouldn't have thought that's possible. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, we were talking a little earlier about the Uncanny Valley and how we looked at a project back in the early 2000s called Final Fantasy. I remember I was working at the union at that time, and there was a lot of concern raised amongst performers and commentators, et cetera, that this was the beginning of the end of human performers, because that movie, which was a big budget movie, was produced with all virtual performances. Using performance capture and then just virtual AI, or it probably was pre-AI, so I guess it was somehow digitally created performers, and it was, unfortunately for them, very unsuccessful. The audience rejected it, and the prevailing theory was the Uncanny Valley concept, which is the idea that as you get closer to but don't reach actual humanity in these artificially created people, that it actually turns people off. There's some innate part of us that is that rejects these almost but not quite human characters.
But what do you think of Avatar? I mean, that's a perfect example where it's similar technology, but it's performance capture with the humans.
Right. So I mean, I think that's the question I'm asking you.
Well, I think
how long can we
I mean,
rely
Cameron
on?
Cameron has basically said, Jim Cameron has said that he has enough in his bank now where he can create scenes with these characters not using the actors. Now he chooses to use them, but he has the luxury of doing that.
Ultimately, I think it's going to shake out. It's not going to be either or. So it's going to be, the application is going to be more of a hybrid model. So yes, so if you're creating a film, you might synthetically generate background actors, or you might synthetically generate a part of a scene where when you're actually capturing the film, your actor, you didn't get exactly what you wanted them to do. You didn't get the right angle. You didn't get the right phrase, the right speech, the right expression. But actors will still need to appear in front of camera. So I think it's going to be a bit of both. You already see this now in the industry, right? Where you have like some really interesting VFX studios mixing AI. It isn't one or the other. I think it's going to be a combination of the two. But is AI going to be capable of generating something entirely synthetic from scratch? Yes. But the best product might still be something where you have both. You have the real and the AI. You have the synthetic and the authentic mixed in.
I do think that's interesting, because I also see in the way people are interacting with, say, the metaverse or Web3, like I do think most people struggle to make the leap all the way to fully immersive technology, for example. And I this is just my own personal experience. I think when when we have augmented reality, these things that are bridging the gap, I think people find it easier to interact with than like, oh, I'm fully in a completely different world. And some people, but I think the society en masse, that bridge, at least for a while, I think is going to be important.
And people like to create, and people like to engage with something authentic from someone who they follow. So for instance, it's already possible now. So we can already create a synthetic clone of Matt's voice, and we could do Matt's podcast that's entirely synthetically created. Already possible. But do people want to engage with that? Maybe as a gimmick, but they probably want to listen to your podcast where you're actually talking about it.
They know, though.
But well, have you seen?
I could spend a lot of time in Mexico.
Have you seen? Yeah, you could. Have you seen that hour-long conversation between Steve Jobs and Joe Rogan? It's like, so basically, it's an hour-long podcast entirely synthetically generated between Steve Jobs and Joe Rogan, where they're talking about how meta that is. So it's already possible, but that doesn't mean that the value of creatives or creators is going to diminish, because you might find it. Oh, Apple, by the way, very quietly unleashed a few days ago the first completely AI-generated audiobooks. So yes, AI is going to completely generate content, whether it's audio, video, images, but that doesn't mean that authentic content won't be valuable.
I agree. I think that it's going to replace a certain aspect of the business, and like you said, background actors and perhaps, reshoots and things like that. But ultimately, that human element is very, very difficult. And I think you're going to still see the human element in film and TV.
Yeah, and like things like comedy. So let's say you're interviewing me for your podcast, like this natural riff that we have going on. You can't necessarily replace that with AI. But what you might use is an AI software like Descript, where you overdub your voice because you really wanted to say something and you misspoke, and you incorporate that into the final product.
So this is a slightly different topic, and I know we've got to wrap up shortly, but I can't resist asking the both of you since I've got you here. I'm sure you both had read the stories about how there was a Google programmer who left the company over the
Lambda.
allegation that, in fact, they have sentient AI basically locked in the basement and that they won't admit it. What do you think? Is that true?
I think that these generative technologies, right, they're so powerful. We've all played with something like ChatGPT. We've seen DALL-E, Stable Diffusion. And because the outputs are just so incredible, it's hard not to imagine that this is somehow sentient or on the level of a human, right? We're talking right now that Google thing was their equivalent of ChatGPT,
right,
Lambda. Right. I don't think they're sentient. Does that mean that we won't reach the point where AI does become sentient? Absolutely not. But I don't think we're there yet. And actually having that conversation, like, is this AGI, is this sentient AI, kind of is a relevant conversation, but it kind of distracts us from like the issues that are relevant to this right now.
I'm more of a conspiracy theorist. I think it is real.
It is real.
Yeah. And I think these companies are keeping everybody away from it because they recognize the uproar that it would cause.
The ethical questions that it would raise that maybe nobody wants to answer just yet.
And I'm not saying it's perfected or anything, but it's getting there. It's getting to the point where it's almost impossible that they haven't reached some kind of consciousness or sentience. I don't know how to describe it, but a computer that can make decisions in almost the same way a human would.
There's no doubt we'll reach that point.
I hope we remember the cautionary tale also told by James Cameron in Terminator, and let's not let Skynet happen by us being too mean to our AIs. So.
I listened to an interview recently where he said he gets asked about that all the time.
I bet.
Yeah.
Nina, Matt, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your insights, and our members in our union continue to be at the front of technology, and we benefit so much by having people like you who've been in this space and thought about it and been tracking it, and we really appreciate your insights.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The SAG-AFTRA podcast is produced and edited by Aaron Goddard and John Small. Supervising producers are Pamela Greenwalt, Shira Reich, and Michael McNulty, with production and marketing support from Damon Romine, Jalika Conte, Margot Giordano, Bernadine Robbins, and Maria Cabezas. This podcast is hosted by Ben Whitehair and me, yours truly, Duncan Crabtree Ireland.
For more information and resources from today's episode, please visit sagaftra.org/podcast. And if you gained any value from today's podcast, please consider sharing it with someone else who might find value. If you haven't already, please tap that subscribe button and take a few seconds to rate and review this episode. And please follow SAG-AFTRA on our official social media channels. That's @SAG-AFTRA on all major platforms, including YouTube.